Do you solemnly swear that the evidence you will give this court and jury in the case now on trial shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Thank you. Please take the witness stand.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Good morning, Your Honor.
Could you please, just speak into the microphone and introduce yourself to the jurors by telling them your first and last name and spelling your last name, please.
My name is Iman Sadoughi, Sadoughi.
Thank you, sir. And are you employed?
Yes, I am.
By whom?
I am employed by the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab under the Department of State Police. I work in the criminalistics unit, and I'm also a member of our crime scene response unit.
How long have you worked in that capacity, sir?
I have been employed since January of 2015.
All right. And just could you briefly describe your educational background for the jurors?
I have a bachelor's degree in biology and a master's degree in forensic science, both of which I obtained from Towson, Maryland.
Thank you. And could you just describe your general responsibilities in the criminalistics and crime scene response unit?
With regards to the criminalistics unit, I examine physical evidence to determine the presence or absence of biological fluids, such as blood, semen, or saliva, and perform the initial classification of trace materials, such as hairs or fibers. Based on the requirements set by our protocols to establish forensic links and or positive testing results, I will then prepare samples for other units within the lab, such as our DNA unit or our arson and trace analysis unit.
Thank you.
Based on
Go ahead.
Then, based on my findings and my collections, I will prepare a report, and when requested of me, I will testify in court. With regards to the crime scene response unit responsibilities, I respond to mostly the western region of Massachusetts. When I arrive, I obtain basic information from investigators as to what they believe may have transpired, if they have any requests, and then I will begin my examination of the crime scene. This could be a residence, it could be a vehicle, motorcycle, or it could be a subject. I will then document my notes and my observations using diagrams and on pages. I will perform testing as necessary, perform collection as necessary, and then I will transport the evidence back to our crime lab, where I will submit it into our laboratory management system. Finally, I will author a report for my scene response, and when requested of me, I will testify in court.
Thank you, sir. And have you testified before in Massachusetts?
Yes, I have.
Could you estimate perhaps how many times?
Approximately 15 times.
Okay. And are there certain, before you can perform field work, do you have to pass certain tests, competency tests and proficiency tests?
Yes, there are.
Could you explain those to the jurors, please?
Competency test is administered at the end of training. I received an extensive on-the-job training for approximately 1 year. The competency was to, it had a written portion and a lab portion. It was to determine that I can follow the protocols and obtain expected results on mock evidence. It also has a written portion to understand the theoretical testing behind what I was performing. Did you also mention proficiency tests?
I did. If you could just explain those as well.
And proficiency tests are administered periodically. Those are to test my ability for continued competency over the years as I'm employed, and I have successfully done all of those tests.
Thank you.
Hello, Dolores.
Have you in fact responded
Welcome.
to crime scenes in your role as a forensic scientist?
Yes, I have.
Could you estimate perhaps how many?
Approximately 250 crime scenes or responses. Out of those 250, approximately 50 where I responded as a training analyst.
Thank you. And have you worked in the criminalistic section on preparing samples for DNA testing?
Yes, I have.
And could you estimate perhaps how many times you've worked on samples for that?
Samples or items are in the thousands. I wouldn't have an exact number.
Okay, thank you. I want to direct your attention now specifically to your work in this particular case. Were you assigned to be a crime scene response person in this matter?
Yes.
And were you also responsible for some criminalistics testing in this matter?
Yes.
All right. And well, I think we mentioned this, but are all investigations within your laboratory assigned a specific laboratory designation number?
Yes, they are.
All right. And I know it's been a long time. Do you happen to recall that lab number offhand?
The lab number for the case that we are here today is 19-01217.
All right. And then could you just describe for the jurors, so that's the overriding number?
That is the number that we use internally. All the testing, any crime scene responses by me or any other analyst, including our sworn members assigned to the crime lab, is done under this case number.
All right. And as items are submitted in this particular investigation, are they given a further distinctive identifying number?
Yes, they are. At the time of submission, each item will be assigned a specific item number. Those item numbers will follow our sub-designation of the submission. So each time someone submits evidence for this case, that will be a, let's say, submission, for example, 4. Every item under that submission 4 will be a 4-1, 4-2, 4-3, so those sub numbers will be assigned after that 4 until all the items that are being submitted are entered into the system, and then our electronic system, computer management system will then track custody and any other testing results and reports along for those items.
Thank you, sir. And did you, in fact, respond to 92 White Street in Westfield on January 13th of 2019?
Yes, I did.
And do you recall approximately what time you may have gotten there?
It was in the afternoon.
All right. And what was your role when you arrived at the location?
I was briefed on the investigation that was taking place. I was informed which apartment within this residence I would be processing, and then along with working with our crime scene services section, we determined the plan, placed the plan in place, and we went in and processed the residence in apartment 2 for various testing and collection of physical evidence.
Thank you. Before you enter into a crime scene, are there certain measures you do to protect the scene or limit contamination?
It does vary slightly based on scenes, but we would, put booties on we would wear gloves and be mindful of where we are stepping, where we are moving things from, to minimize any contamination or alteration of the scene until it is processed and completed.
So specifically at 92 White Street, did you go up to the second floor apartment?
Yes.
Did you make observations in the kitchen area?
Yes, I did.
And just generally, what were your initial observations in the kitchen?
In the kitchen area, I observed various items along with a deceased individual identified to me as Alexis Avery. I observed to the left side of her blankets, pillows, a knife, a glass cup. There were other additional items in the kitchen, including cigarette butts, plastic trash cans, or trash bags, excuse me. Additionally, I made documentation of Alexis Avery and noticed that she had several injuries to her stomach area, back, neck, and face. In addition to that, I documented that she was wearing a pink hooded sweatshirt that was partially pulled up, black leggings, and a pair of mismatched socks.
Thank you. And as far as evidence that you often describe as red-brown stains, can you tell me what you're looking for when you observe these red-brown stains in a location?
There were red-brown stains throughout the apartment based on the number of bleeders, and then looking at the stains themselves to separate them by size, shape, distribution, and also location. I would then proceed with designating them with a letter and proceeding with our screening test for blood. All of these stains would be documented in my notes or diagrams as I'm processing them, and the testing results would then be performed and documented as well. Once the tests are complete, and I believe that if the test is positive for the screening test for the presence of blood, I will then use swabs, which are Q-tips essentially, and I will moisten them with water and collect those red-brown stains for further testing back at the lab.
Thank you. And I just want to ask you, go back a little bit. You mentioned a screening test for the presence of blood. Is that correct?
Yes.
And just describe for the jurors what you mean by screening test.
Screening tests are tests that we perform initially on evidence where we suspect biological materials. We have them for blood and semen. For blood specifically, at the time we were using the orthotolidine test. This test is used, it was done by taking a filter paper, rubbing a portion of it against a suspected blood stain, which we call red-brown stains, and then adding 2 chemicals. If an immediate blue color developed, then that would be a positive result for a screening test for blood. As I have been saying, screening tests, these tests are not confirmatory. They are known to have false positives, but they are a preliminary result that we can use in order to then collect them and perform, if not limited, additional testing back at the lab.
Thank you. And in this particular investigation at 92 White Street, is it fair to say there were many, many red-brown stains?
Yes.
And you performed screening tests on a large number of those items?
I performed screening tests on approximately 33 stains.
All right. And did you take some of those stains back to your laboratory?
Based on positive results, I did then perform collection on those stains.
And back at the laboratory, do you perform a confirmatory test for blood?
I will, once this is assigned in the criminalistics unit, I will then reevaluate the case, as there could be hundreds of pieces of evidence to look at. I will then determine the most forensically relevant items, and I will go through and examine those. Out of the many swabs I did collect and transport back, or even other items, I selected some of those stains, or the swabs from those stains, for further testing, which is the confirmatory testing for blood.
All right. And so just a couple of specific items. There was a suitcase in the kitchen, is that correct? The suitcase tag?
The suitcase was in the storage area within the apartment, not in the kitchen.
Did you perform confirmatory testing on the red-brown stains on that item?
I did.
And what was the result, if you recall?
Testing for the presence of blood was positive, indicating the presence of human blood.
Did you perform or did you collect a red-brown stain from the kitchen floor between the legs of Miss Avery?
Yes, I did.
Did you perform confirmatory testing on that swab?
Yes, I did.
And what was the result?
Testing for the presence of blood was positive on the mentioned stain between Alexis Avery's legs on the ground, on the floor, indicating the presence of human blood.
Did you perform or did you collect a swab from a knife on the kitchen floor next to a blanket, which was labeled as placard 8?
I did. There were several stains that I did further testing. I would need to refer to my notes or excuse me, my report for all of that.
May he refer to his report, Your Honor?
Yes. Thank you. Can you repeat your question, please?
Certainly, and I'm referring to item 2-49. Did you perform any testing on a kitchen knife or a knife that was recovered from that residence?
Yes, I did.
Could you describe the testing you performed on that item?
I documented any visible staining on the knife. I then designated stains A through E. I performed testing on those items, on those areas. A screening test for the presence of stain E was positive. However, human blood was not detected. A testing for the presence of blood on stains A through D was positive, indicating the presence of human blood.
Thank you. And item 2-50. This was another knife that was located on scene. Did you perform testing on that particular item?
Yes, I did.
Could you describe the results of the testing on that particular item?
Testing for the presence of blood was positive on stains A to C, indicating the presence of human blood.
Thank you. Now, how do you prepare those samples for further DNA testing?
For non-porous items such as a knife, I would then use additional sterile swabs, moistening them with water, and collecting that stain for further testing. I would snippet a portion of the swabs, so a portion gets retained indefinitely at our lab for additional testing, and a portion that will be sent to our DNA unit if those items are requested by me for DNA testing.
At some point, did you have an opportunity to take swabs from Blake Scanlon?
Yes, I did.
All right. And did you take swabs from Mr. Scanlon's hands?
I did.
All right. And both left and right?
Yes.
And did you perform screening or confirmatory testing for blood on those items?
When I responded initially to the crime scene at 92 White Street, I was then redirected to the Westville Police Department, where I met with Mr. Scanlon and I processed him for the presence of biological fluids. At that time, I performed screening tests for areas that had visible red-brown staining. I then collected swabs from those areas and I transported them back to the crime lab, where they will then further tested at in our lab for confirmatory tests for blood. Those areas were his right hand fingernails, left hand fingernails. I had swabs of red brown stains from top and palm sides of his left hand, top and palm side of his right hand, and also red brown stains from the bottom of each of his feet.
Thank you. I want to ask you just a few more questions about the two knives that you processed. So item 2-49. You mentioned that you swabbed different areas of that knife?
Correct.
Could you describe in as much detail as you can where you swabbed that knife and how you did that?
I collected from the various stains, and if I also additionally collected from handles, if I was able to also separate the stains from the unstained areas. In some instances, it is practically not possible to separate the unstained areas from stained areas, so those were collected together.
Were you able to swab that particular item, both the blade and the handle portion?
Yes.
All right. And as far as item 2-50, again, this was another knife with red-brown stains. Were you able to swab the blade and the handle of that item as well?
Correct, yes, I did.
All right. Did you prepare those samples for further DNA testing and analysis?
Yes, I did.
And did you prepare the samples that you collected from Mr. Scanlon's fingernails for further DNA testing and analysis?
I did.
All right. And it's not your job to do the comparative analysis, correct?
No, it is not.
All right. Thank you, sir. I have no further questions.
No questions for this witness.
All right, thank you very much, sir. You're excused.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Saman Salam at this time.